All right, here we are, Warriors and Wildmen. We have a special episode today. It's not as special. Well, it's a different special because Doug's out. Doug's on jury duty, being an American, doing what he's required to do. And I got my longtime buddy on here, Shannon Kapp. He's a pastor and in Portland. And I've known Shannon for more than 20 years. Right, Shannon?
Yeah.
More than 20 years. And Shannon, tell me about who you are and where you're at and what's going on so people know why they should listen to anything you have to say today, because it matters, you know?
Well, I don't know if they should listen to anything I have to say, but yeah, I've been friends with Rich for a long time and been doing the church thing for 27 years. But more importantly, I'm a husband, a dad, and a Jesus guy, and trying to figure out how to help people live better in their lives. And I've just been committed to that. I'm also a football coach. I'm also a consultant. I work with nonprofits and for-profit businesses. My specialty recently has been how to guard from and recover from burnout, because I know a little something about that. Yeah. And then I live in Portland right now. And you live in Portland when you look at your weather on your phone and it says 100% chance of rain.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I met you at a youth conference in Seattle.
Yep.
And tell that story of how we got called out. That's a great story.
Yeah. So I got invited to this conference. I didn't really know anybody, and it was more my personality to kind of chill out in the back and observe what's going on.
Yep. And Pastor Scotty Gourlay was putting on the youth conference.
Yeah, Scotty Gourlay put on the youth conference. And so I'm standing in the back next to this convict, this short guy who's bald.
Bald-headed and a goatee.
Looks like he's a walking mugshot.
That was me.
And we're just hanging out in the back. Didn't really know each other yet. And then all of a sudden, Scotty Gourlay, he's up there prophesying, talking, and praying over youth pastors. And he's like, Shannon and Rich, get out of the back. Like he screams into the mic. He's like,
we're like, what?
Chewing our butt in the middle of the service.
Stop standing in the back. I was like, all right.
That's how we got introduced to each other.
That's how we met. Yeah, we ended up going to dinner or something, I think, with Scotty. Yeah. We hung out. And we've been hanging out ever since. Whenever we can, not enough. I remember one day when you were out here in Phoenix, we were riding motorcycles. You remember that day? You can't forget that day.
Oh, I can't forget that day. What was it?
We were riding down the road, and we looked like a couple of dorks because we had the biggest smile on our face. It was perfect weather.
Yeah.
Nice and cool, sunny. It was just... It was an amazing day.
She's like, it's Christmas morning, man.
Yeah, it was like, it's way too nice of a day to work. We did anyway at the Hideaway. But anyway, yeah, we've been friends for
a couple of beers, but we'll see.
And we've been friends for, like I said, over 20 years. We've talked about ministry, shared life together. Me and Shannon have been through the best and the worst. We've seen each other at our best and at our worst, and well, we're still here,
Cheers to that.
So here we are. Warriors and Wildmen, it's cool, man. We'll have to do another one when Doug's on here so you can come back. Shannon knows Doug, too. We've all hung out together, had some good conversations. So anyway, we want to talk about some cool stuff today. Shannon, we were talking on the phone yesterday about, you were talking about cannibalism of the church. And when we think of a cannibal, you think of something that eats its own kind. And there's actually Bible, there's Bible that talks about that. It says, why would you turn and devour one another? Yeah. Talking about gossip and how people destroy each other. We're not talking so much about gossip, but we are talking about how the church is kind of destroying itself from the inside.
Yep. Yeah. Let me say as a caveat, I'm a fan of any person who pushes the mission of Jesus forward.
Yeah. Good.
I don't really care about style or size or form or anything like that. The thing I was chatting with you about mostly is, Jesus does this really crazy thing called incarnation, which is just a big word that means that I came into a space and a place and I became one of them. What has happened in the American church, and this conversation kind of spearheaded out of some consultant stuff I was doing, but also a conversation I was having with somebody recently, where the conversation came up that the church, now Christianity is a minority in the world population, but then that minority is actually shrinking. The global church is shrinking, getting smaller, and where that conversation came up was. I said, well, the ecclesia is never going to die. The ecclesia is just a word that means the coming together of God's people. That can't die because Jesus said it can't die.
Yeah, the called out ones, the ones that are separate. Yeah.
But the structure is dying, and it's not the devil's fault. It's not the world's fault. It's not culture's fault. It's the church's fault. It's because we forgot this little thing that Jesus did called incarnation, because what we like to do is colonize. We like to come into a community, and I won't name churches right now, but we'll have a big church, and not that big church, because big church is relevant. If you're in a community of 1,000 people and you got a church of 100 people, you have a massive church.
That's a big church.
That's a big church. So it's a relative term, but you have this big church that comes into a community that does their lights, camera, action, doesn't really want to help people or develop leaders. They just want to push everybody towards the stage. And so this person says, well, my church isn't shrinking. And I say, well, and you're the problem. Because what's happened is to be one of the average church in America is only 86 people, but to be on the top 100 largest churches in America, you have to be over 7,500 people, which means that the church still is mostly small churches.
Yeah, and if you're over 200, you're already in the top 20%.
Yeah,
because so many churches are. And you know what's interesting about the size of a average size of a church? Said 86. In sociology, your primary social group is 80 people, and so that's the power actually of a small church like that is you can't kill it. You can't kill it. You know, so I think that's an interesting thing. But the longer it stays that size, the harder it is to break out of that mold too. That's a whole different topic.
Yeah, and so I don't think churches should stay small, because anything that's actually helping people is going to grow.
Sure.
Like if you and I go to a great restaurant this afternoon, and we have a good experience, we're going to share that with our friends,
right?
Because we want to share things we enjoy. And so,
yeah, but then you have churches like Tommy Barnett, Phoenix First Assembly. That's been 10,000 forever. And that guy wins everybody, but it's like he wins them and then they move out to the local churches, the churches in the surrounding area, because he's a winner. So his church I think his church is growing the big C.
Yeah.
More than just his local church. So his church, if you looked at it from that kind of metric, you might say it's not growing, but it actually is. It's growing. But I know that's a whole separate issue.
Yeah.
As well. And
so it's not a big church, small church thing. But what happens is some churches that will go unnamed, they essentially want to entertain you to the point that you just come back and get your fix from them, but they're not going to help you. They're not going to empower you. They're not going to send you. They're not a reservoir that's refreshing everything downstream from it. It is the end of itself. Yeah. And those churches are killing the church in America, because what happens is when that church comes into town, it's the Walmart effect. Yeah. If you're in a church of, whatever size, and they're doing their best and they've served your family well for X number of years, but then this church comes in.
And then Hillsong pops up.
Okay, you said it.
So Hillsong comes and has a concert, and you and your church help pay for it and support it. And then 2 years later, surprise. Yeah. We bought a local pastor. I mean, we started a church.
Yeah.
And then everybody goes, we love Hillsong, it's the best. And they're not the only ones that do it. They're just the most prominent ones doing it.
Yeah, and that's the cannibalization. And then you also have right now, and as a consultant, I've helped a bunch of churches do campuses and satellites, and I think all that's good. But that should never be in place of raising up leaders, empowering leaders, and sending leaders into communities. But what we have seen a little bit of, and I think we're going to see more and more of, is because what people forget is pastors are humans too.
What?
And yeah, I know. And so it's not a matter of will a pastor have a moral failing? It's going to happen because they're humans too.
Well, yeah, and then you have to define moral failing, because it could be from here to here, so people automatically think that's talking about adultery. It doesn't have to be talking
It
about
doesn't have to be
that.
that. And then even in our culture.
But how about
there's
this? How about
real-
not even a moral failing? How about you disappointed me?
Yeah.
That you could take that to the bank. You could take that to the bank.
Or you
unless
ethical issues.
oh, how about this? Let's just blow this up right now. Unless the pastor, you don't know him, and they maintain their image, and don't let anybody get around them because they know how the system works and they know how church people work, and so they don't let anybody get to know them, and they just blow in and blow up and blow out, and then you see them the next week, and their life is very private because they don't want to be destroyed. And so people put them up on that pedestal. I was watching a thing on the news one time, and they were actually talking about Tiger Woods, why do people love to just tear that guy apart? And the lady, she was a psychiatrist or a psychologist, I don't remember. She said, well, you have to understand, we love to build people up and put them on pedestals almost as much as we love tearing them down.
Yeah.
And so what happens is that's a double-edged sword right there. And so you have pastors that are like, I'm gonna build this image, I'm gonna maintain this image, and it's all about my image. And then people have what they expect, and especially American cultural Christianity, of what they expect a pastor should say, what they should expect what a pastor would, and they say that kind of stuff. And so they just conform to that. And they become ineffective anyway. You're not going to be effective being like that. And then the second that you do anything they don't like, they tear you to shreds.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I was going to say too. Because what can happen is either A, they can have a real moral failing, they can whatever. The myriad of things that humans do because they're humans, not because they're evil or because their pastors are not pastors, they're just humans. Or they can have a perceived moral failing, or they can just have they can be the byproduct of somebody's terrible attitude.
Somebody else can screw up in the church and blame it on and they'll blame that on the pastor. How can you not know?
We were just talking.
Hey, when I was a youth pastor at Community Christian, remember when I was a youth pastor at Community Christian with Pastor Doug? He's an awesome guy. When I was working there, I got called in the office one day because my son Levi, who's now 20, Levi was in the nursery and bit another kid in the face. Well, that's shocking, right? I mean, that is shocking. It's like kids bite, but bite somebody in the face, that's pretty wild, So when the teacher went and grabbed him, he tried to bite the teacher in the face. And so the pastor's like telling me, and I'm shocked, like, I don't even know what to do. That's crazy. I never heard of that. This is my third kid. I don't know, And the pastor says, but the reason I called you in here is because the person who came to tell me said, and what kind of pastor has a baby like that? And Pastor Doug started cracking up laughing, and he said, we're talking about a baby biting a baby and trying to bite a teacher, and now it's on the father of a baby. We're not talking about even a toddler, right? And so it was so incredible. And he told those people, get out of my office. Like,
yeah.
But that's how quickly. And then here's another thing. You talk about pastors, they want to build this image. There's another word for image, by the way. It's idol. And God's not just mad at the people who worship the idol. He's mad at the people who build them. Because remember, Moses said to Aaron, what's up with this idol? He's like, I took the gold the people gave me and I threw it in the fire and this walked out. Oh, right. Yeah. All of a sudden. Good one, So they build these idols for the people to worship, and it takes away the worship of God because we're substituting the worship of God, obviously. So anyway, that creates this dynamic in the church where you can say and do whatever you want to the pastor. He's not going to say or do anything back.
Yeah. And I think when you say that, I think about John the Baptist, who was really good at deflecting. Like it ain't me, it's him. It ain't me, it's him. It ain't me, it's him. He's a great example of how pastors should actually conduct themselves. It ain't me, it's him. Right?
Well, I'm actually, how about this? I know you know this, but I'm actually going to court soon.
Yeah.
With a former member of my church that filed an injunction of harassment against me. Having never, check this out, I didn't like that dude when he went to my church.
I didn't like him when I came and helped your church.
Yeah, I tried to avoid him at every possible turn. And then now he wants to make sure that I don't bother him. It's like, oh, I promise I'm not going to bother. I've never threatened him. I've never nothing. But he's mad because I told him, you can't treat your wife that way.
Yeah.
So now we have this weird thing where it's like, I can go file a lawsuit against you. And here's the interesting thing. So inevitably, there's people that say, well, we know how you are, which that in itself is an indictment.
Yeah.
And then they say things like this, well, that's why this is happening. And we were talking about Scotty earlier. I was telling my leaders, I said, for those of you who think that this happened because of how I am, I said, because I haven't been accused of any crime. I haven't been guilty of a crime. I'm not even accused. And I said, but not only that, Jesus said this. He said, John came neither eating or drinking. Yeah. And he said he had a demon. And the son came eating and drinking. And you said he was a drunkard and a friend of prostitutes. And he said, we played the music, man, you won't dance. He's like, what's going on? And so I really thought about this, Shannon. I thought about the fact that John the Baptist and Jesus' ministries were so completely different.
Yeah.
But why did they hate it? Which they killed them both, by the way. I might point that out.
Yeah.
They killed both of them because they had the same spirit.
Yeah.
The same spirit. Two very different manifestations of ministry. Yep. Same spirit. Okay, one's the Son of God. I get that. But two very distinct manifestations of their faith look very different. Both ended up in the same fate. And I was talking about Scotty, and I said, because any pastor is going to get tore up. That's what people do. They love it. They rejoice in it. Yeah. And I was telling my leaders, I said, so you think I'm like that? I said, Scotty doesn't argue with anybody online. He doesn't say the things that I say. He doesn't do the things that I do. And they're saying the same things about him that they say about me. Two completely different manifestations of the same spirit. And they hate it because demon-possessed people hate people with the spirit of Christ.
Yeah. Well, and some of that is just the way the world is working. And we as a church need to figure it out. Like, in other words, this ball is going to pick up speed because, 20 years ago, church was a seller's market. Like, if I wanted what the church offers, I had to go to it and get it. Mm-hmm. But what's happened now is the church has kind of decided that what we offer now is entertainment, and I can get that upon my hand.
Yeah.
And now
but youth ministries used to do that, and now the church is doing it. Yeah. Remember we'd tell youth ministry, don't try to compete with, concerts and Disneyland. Yeah. Give what only the church can give.
Yeah. And in addition to that, it's, we talked about this a little bit before we got online, was like, you and I can go to lunch today, have a great meal, great whatever, and what we say matters when we leave. It doesn't matter how good the meal was, how good the service was, how good anything was.
Doesn't matter what the truth is.
No, it doesn't matter. It matters what we say. And so, so on one hand, the church is killing itself because this entertainment model, this colonization model, not incarnational model. And Acts 17 is a really good chapter on this whole thing where Paul ends up in Athens and he's having such an impact in the cosmos, not in the church, but in the cosmos. He's not church centric. He's like culture centric,
community centric. Yeah.
Community centric, right? Yeah. Like, and that's what happens in a lot of church today. Hey, just come to our church and then let our church be your only life.
Yeah. And that's crazy.
Instead of the church being an ascending place back into the cosmos, which happens to be what Jesus said, go into all the world.
Yeah, exactly. Because what you were saying, okay, so we take, and I want to differentiate between the two. You take big church and what I call traditional church model, Sunday and Wednesday, multiple ministries. And then you take a cell church, which is a completely different animal. Because the whole purpose of cell church is it's small groups of people studying the Bible and taking life to a community and creating hundreds and even thousands of access points to the church through relationships and meetings in other people's homes throughout the week, right? That's a completely different model, which that's what we use, obviously. I'm advocating that. And I always tell people, I'm not married to the model. If you find a better way, I'm going to do it. I'm married to Jesus, the Great Commission. You find a better way to do it, I'm in 100%, right? But the best way that I know and what I see in Scripture is small groups of people winning and discipling people. Okay, and then you take another church, a big church. It doesn't have to start as a big church, can end up as a big church. But what they do is they say, hey, come down on Sunday. We'll give you some good worship and we'll give you some talking. Because I'm going to tell you what right now. I'm going to get pissed. I'm going to say it. Because I'm going to tell you right now, half this crap ain't preaching, dude. I don't even know what the hell they're talking about. I don't know. I had a person say recently, they said that I am a good Bible teacher, but now I just rant for 30 minutes and then give 3 quick points at the end. And I thought, well, that's really interesting because right now I'm teaching on the 8 essential doctrines of Christianity. And I'm literally teaching. I'm barely preaching. I'm teaching for an hour about the essential doctrines of Christianity. I just preached this week on original sin and what it means and your relationship with Christ and understanding how your nature works and how to overcome that, you know. And I literally said to my wife, how many people are preaching stuff like that on Sunday morning? No, they're not. They're giving you a TED Talk with a Bible verse stuck to it. No challenge, no conviction, no correction, no confrontation, no exhortation, you know, nothing prophetic, nothing that cuts across and convicts you and makes you leave and think I've changed. Because if you do that, they won't come back. And so here's what we do. We create a church with no requirements, no standard. It's all, you know what the standard is? That's not true. There is a standard. American cultural Christianity is a standard. Just be nice. Just whatever. What would Jesus do? As long as it's not what he would really do, but what I would say he would do, which is nothing. Let's just be cheesy and lame and do that. And then we're Christians. And people go, well, I can go to this church because I can go there and nothing's required. I don't have to change. I feel great about myself. I'm gonna go every week.
Yeah.
Or twice a month.
Yeah, and that's the problem, is because that's where cultural Christianity in America is cannibalizing the church, because in God's intention, there's always motion. John's always pointing to Jesus. Jesus is always pointing to the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit's always pointing us to God. Like the God's always pointing us back to Jesus. Like there's always motion. When you said cell church, you know, I agree with that model. And whether you're a cell church, small group church, I don't care what label you give it. An empowering church is what we're talking about here. Why it's essential for the church to fulfill its mission, not for it to be big, not for it to be popular, not for it to get Instagram followers, but for it to fulfill its mission, it has to be sending. Cal Berkeley did a study in 1975 of why 50% of the malls in America succeeded and 50% of them failed. And what they found was simple. The malls with the more entrances succeeded, and the malls with the fewer entrances failed. Because when you and I go to the mall, we always park near the store we like to shop in.
Yep. And then you don't go anywhere.
And it's entrance points. And it's God's wisdom to say, can we create spaces and places for people to find and follow Jesus, right? And so and that's the beauty of a sending church. The problem is when a church isn't sending, when it becomes an end in of itself. I think that's the part where we start colonization and cannibalizing. And I was saying in Acts 17, you know, Paul gets into Athens, and so he's born into the first space, the cosmos, into the world. He's called out of it into the second space, the church, right? And people want to jump up and down on that, come out and be separate from among them scripture. But the second space was never a destination. It's a sending place. And then it's a training, healing. Yeah, getting marching orders. That's training place. Yes, exactly. But the problem is this colonization, entertainment.
It's not where I want to live. How many people have you heard say this? Man, I wish we could have an island, just all the Christians, we could just move there. And the devil's like, yeah, I did that with the monks back in the day. They were the holiest people. They loved God the most. And I told them, you know, it'd be cool if you moved away from everybody else. Bro. And they did with great intention. Yeah. And the devil got the people that love God the most to move away from the people. And Christians are doing it now. They're like, let's have a Christian grocery store. Let's have a Christian coffee shop. I don't want to go to a Christian coffee shop. I don't want to. I want to get coffee, and I want to be around people.
Yeah, Jesus is the model, and he was maximum love, maximum change. Monks got a lot of love. They ain't changing nobody.
Yeah, but check this out. That wasn't their intention.
No.
They had good intentions. And here's another thing. Your good intentions in loving God, you might still be wrong.
Yep. Yeah. Back to this Acts 17 thing. So Paul doesn't end up just being entertained by the church for the rest of his life and calls that his Christianity. He then gets sent back into the cosmos, into the first space, and that's where he's having impact, right? One of the reasons I love Acts 17, because in there, that's when he quotes that in him we live, in him we move, and in him we have our being, which is out of a poem of Zeus. was essentially quoting lyrics to a good song, because he understood his culture. He was back in it, talking to them where they're at, and then he gets invited into the third space, which was the Areopagus, where the philosophizers and the leaders and the politicians and those who actually really influenced the community hung out. And he gets to bring Jesus to that space. And actually, it actually names people in that space who were community leaders who made decisions to follow Jesus that day. But that never happens if he's just going to church.
Well, how about this? This is one of the things I love. So Jesus sends the most religious, Pharisee, church-educated to the world.
Love it.
And then he takes some sweaty, stanky fisherman and goes, you're going to the church. They're like, we don't want him. That's who you get. You get Peter. The world's like, we don't want that religious guy. And then the world gets Paul.
Yeah. And how about
that's just like God.
Yeah. And how about that he puts the whole franchise in the hands of the stinky fisherman, liar, disloyal, backbiting.
Yeah, and then how about this? And then uses the Pharisee to get in his face and correct him for being legalistic. How good is that?
Love it.
That's the fishermen started conforming to the legal system, and the teacher of the law was like, nah, bro, we're not doing it like that. Yeah. Because we have to carry out the mission. It's all about the mission. So the problem is you can build a church today without God.
Yeah, absolutely.
I see people do it all the time.
Absolutely.
And it's funny because I tell people I'm a church growth expert, and they say, well, why aren't your churches bigger? Well, because I refuse to do what it takes to build a church like that. And I can tell you this, when my church was at its biggest, it was at its weakest. Not just that we had less committed people, it's that we lost direction and vision because here's the deal. Sometimes you lower the standard of leadership and you think that you're opening the door for people to step up. But what I never saw coming was it presents an option for leaders to step down. It's like, why am I doing all this when that's okay too? And they go the other way. And then somebody was telling me the other day, this is great. This is what they say about my church. Well, the best people left, and the people that you have now are just the people who stuck around. And I literally cracked up laughing. I thought, man, this is a great testimony, because here's a word for people who think like that. If you ain't around, you ain't worth jack.
Yeah, for real.
Hey, what's the best football player that doesn't play in the game? What's the best fighter who doesn't fight? What's the best writer who doesn't write?
Yeah.
What if God was the best in heaven, didn't come die for us on the cross? It don't mean jack. God commanded his love toward us in that while we were sinners, Christ died on the cross. Command, that's action, man. Things are moving. Things are happening. I don't want to hear about the best. You know what the best are doing now? They ain't doing nothing. They ain't doing jack crap because they were never the best. You know what they were the best at? Image. They're the best at image. Yep. They're the best at getting people to buy into their image, but they weren't the best at getting people to follow Christ and be Christ-like and lay their life down for anyone else, because they're the best at building image. So you know what I say? I say Jesus heated it up and then scraped the dross off the top.
Yep. Yeah.
That'd get me fired up.
Like I don't know if I'm qualified to give the answer, but I think
you're not going to Solomon it and say, this is the final thing.
This is the final answer. I think an answer isn't you should have a big church. You should have a small church. Because I actually think if your church is helping people are going to come, which is a good thing. But the answer isn't actually looking to your church to be the answer. The answer is looking to Jesus and then living out your faith in your community. You incarnating the gospel of Jesus wherever you go. That's what's going to keep the ecclesia healthy and growing and gaining new people into the kingdom of God. It's going to be believers fulfilling the mission, not looking to their church to be the answer.
Dude, I have a perfect example of that. I had a guy that was been with me for 20 years that said, yeah, I'm going to have to go to another church. I said, okay. And he said, I just don't really have any friends there. So It's my job to get you friends. So after 20 years, you don't think you could go and be a friend? You don't think you could go and bring people? In 20 years, you don't have any disciples? You had nobody that you won to Jesus that you would say, this is my friend. That's not a testimony against me, dog. That's a testimony against you. What the hell are you talking about?
I'm going to give you a tool. You ready?
Yeah.
So my kids, my kids had to go to a bunch of schools because of my work and my craziness. But whenever they go to new school, you know what I tell them? Here's a bunch of packs of gum. Walk up to people and say, hey, those are some nice shoes. Want a piece of gum? Because everybody likes to get complimented and nobody says no to a piece of gum.
There you go.
That's my strategy to help make a friend.
Hey, I'll tell you what, you can make a lot of money in church doing that because some people's breath be kicking like kung fu. They need a whole pack of gum, man. If somebody's giving you gum in church, don't ever say no. Always say yes. Yeah, that's true, man. It's just funny because, you know the great quote by Kennedy, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. But it's the same with the church, man. It's like, well, we like the church, and I know we all got saved here, but the church down the street, their parking lot is like the parking lot to Disneyland. The kids' ministry is bigger than the whole church building, and they give a full-size Snickers bar to each kid every week. Oh, well, hell, let's go there because that is absolutely what the Holy Spirit is doing. Look, I'm not against excellence. I'm not against doing things great. But that's not the point. The point is, why didn't they get you saved? Here's another thing about those type of churches you're talking about. They're kind of cannibalizing the church. Because I'll tell you what, the angels in heaven rejoice every time a person goes to a different church.
Yeah.
That's not what the Bible says. Every time a person repents, now they're coming into the kingdom, right? The angels in heaven rejoice. They don't rejoice when we move the sheep to another pen. Woo, look, you did it. Church growth. Let's get you in a magazine, right? But, right? Is that,
yeah.
It's weird.
Yeah.
So what happens with a lot of these people from these churches, this is amazing, dude. When I say this, you're going to freak out because you've heard people do it. They don't tell anybody about Jesus. They don't invite anybody to church. And the second that you get saved, they say, you should come try my church.
Yep.
What the hell is that about?
Yep. Or they'll attend like 5 churches.
Yeah.
Because they're not trying to grow.
No, because I belong part of the body.
Yeah, bro, and a good symptom of all this is I consulted a church in North Carolina that's on that's in the magazine for being one of the fastest growing and largest churches in America. They claim 10,000 people, and I promise you that there was never more than 2,500 people in that church on any given weekend.
There you go.
Never.
Wait, so, Shannon, are you telling me that churches would lie?
Oh, I know it's incredible.
Okay, that's a weird thing.
And what bothers my mind is like 2,500 people. That's respectable, bro. Like that's a lot of people.
That's a lot of people
every week.
That's a lot of people.
But for some reason, this individual in this space felt the pressure to have to lie to the world.
Yeah. How about this?
To the point that they lie to themselves and believe it.
Hey, Pastor Cesar said one time when he was talking, Cesar Castellanos was talking to a group of pastors, and he's speaking with a translator, obviously, but he says, a pastor's mood, whether he's happy on a Sunday, is according to whether or not the building is full. And everybody's like, kind of, yeah, that's true, and he says, but buildings are so many different sizes. People are quiet, and then he says, so if you're not happy, just get a smaller building, and then your ego will be fine. Dude, it was silent in there. And he said, or you could do like I did when I reached 10,000 people, then I reached 50,000 people, and a group of pastors met with me and said, when is it ever going to be enough? And he said, what? And they said, you have 50,000 people. He said, I'm not counting the number of people in my church. I'm counting the number of people outside my church. That's what drives me to do the mission. These are people that don't know Jesus. They don't go to any church. And so what happens is we start building our own ego and our own kingdom, and we start becoming an idol. We're still building our image instead of saying, hey, we got to win the whole world for Jesus. You know, it's funny. In Yuma, I would say, we probably have more than 1,000, maybe as many as 2,000 people that got saved or attended our church or in other churches. So I would ask this question: why do they hate me? Why don't they send me a Christmas card? Like, like I get it. People don't want to hang out at our church. It's too hard. Your church is way easier. I got that.
Yeah.
You know, whatevs. You know, look, man, not everybody's going to be in the pros. You know, not everybody's going to be all sold out, hardcore, and on fire for Jesus. Some people are going to suck, you know, and they're going to give $5 a week and say, hey, man, I changed the world. Whatevs, you know, whatever your metric is. Because here's the deal. You have to answer to Jesus about that, not to me. So whatevs. But why do they hate me?
Yeah.
You know why? Because it sells, man.
It's fun.
Because it sells. And I not this kind of jack, but I kind of like it.
Yeah, I know.
I kind of like that they don't like me. Saves me a lot of times from going to gay pastor lunches. And you know what they said? One time they called me, they said, two great stories. One, they said, hey, do you want to come to pastor's prayer once a month? I said, no. They said, why? And I said, because I'm a pastor. Every time I pray, it's pastor's prayer. Yeah. And they said, no, seriously. I said, seriously, you want to know why I don't come? They said, yeah. And I said, because you have a room with some pastors in it, and then you got a bunch of people that aren't pastors, and the people that aren't pastors, their pastors allow them to try to go prophesy over the pastors. You're out of order. Those people are out of order. I don't want to pray with those people. It's a waste of time. And then another time they said, hey, we're having pastors meeting once a month. We want you to come, a lunch. Yeah. And I said, cool, where's it at? They said, at the Mission. I said, nah, I ain't coming. So they kept inviting me. I would tell them, no, I'm not coming. And they said, well, why won't you come? And I said, because I'm not homeless. I don't eat at the Mission. And they were like, that's not very humble. I said, well, it's funny because our government officials, our school officials, our business people in our city don't eat at the Mission. I write checks to the Mission. I don't eat at the Mission. Yeah. Well, not everybody can afford it. Well, then you can't afford to change the world. That's how it is, baller. Let's go. Yeah. And then I'm the bad guy because I told the truth. But you know, I don't want to go hang out at the Mission. Yeah. If I hang out at the Mission, I'm there to do ministry, not to get lunch. If I'm having a meeting, I want to have a meeting in a restaurant. You know what I'm saying? Like, and then I'm the bad guy because I said the truth. People don't want to hear the truth, man. They don't like that stuff. They want to play church. They want to be nice. I'm not nice, and I want to play church.
Yeah. Well, you know, I mean, I unfortunately get an inside look at a bunch of churches' finances, and it's amazing how they have to convince themselves how what they're doing is pushing the mission of Jesus forward. It's amazing. I have to tell themselves, right? Like I always think about when I look at people's finances and they ask, you know, churches ask me to help them with that stuff. I always think about my mom. My mom was a single mom. My dad abandoned her and the family. She would work like 3 jobs, but still kept her boys and her in church every week, still gave every week. Like, it was a sacrifice.
Yeah, man.
It was we were broke as a joke, but she still gave to the church faithfully. And those dollars mattered. Yeah. They were her act of faith, and how we steward that stuff matters, you know, and it's amazing to me. I think people give those dollars. You think at some point people give those dollars because they're expecting you to actually fulfill the thing you say you're there to do. Whatever your mission statement is, love God, love people, which is the popular one, whatever it is, right? They expect when they put money in
our mission statement's not as popular. It's win souls and make disciples.
Yeah.
That'll make you choose the Disneyland church. Yeah.
But they expect you to actually do the thing that you say you're there to do. But it is, but you find out real quick. You find out real quick that a lot of those dollars are not actually fulfilling the mission. They're actually fulfilling the real mission,
which is taking care of those people and building that church and building those finances.
Getting more people to come to church.
Yep. Advertising.
Getting more people to sit in rows and not circles.
People that aren't going to do anything. Yeah. So I think we need to get back to the place where churches carrying out the mission, the Great Commission, obviously is supposed to be the mission. How do we do that? By sending people into the community and talking to people about Jesus. And part of that obviously is inviting them to church, you know, but it's not, hey, look, here's a Walmart church. The thing about Walmart is funny. He said, You can go to Walmart. Walmart's fine. You can get cheap stuff there. That's how those churches are too. You get something cheap there, no problem. Yep. And but the funny thing is this: if you go to a mom and pop shop, you get personal care.
Yep.
And that's worth something, right?
Yep.
When you think of how people do church, you can go to a smaller church where you're going to get personal care, you know, but you also can go to a church that has cell groups, some type of cell groups. You don't have to call them cell groups. I don't care what they call them. Yeah, but you have to have some type. You cannot disciple people in a large setting. Discipleship happens in a small group setting. It's not going to happen apart from that. It's not, a book doesn't take its place. A lecture doesn't take its place. A video doesn't take its place. Those things all have a part, you know, but it's got to happen in a small group setting. So you need to be in a church, even if it's a big church, you need to be in a church that has a small group setting where people can have the character of Christ formed in them, and they can grow, and they can get the help and attention that they need. We tell people at our church, Shannon, we have time for everybody here. That doesn't mean I'm going to meet with everybody here. It doesn't make sense. Not even physically possible. But we have a leader who can meet with you, and whatever level of your need is, we have a leader that can meet you at that level. And if it's something that fewer people, we'll put you in contact with the right people.
Absolutely.
And we'll take care of you. And I think that's important because people need to get back to being disciples, not just attending church.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of the road. Like I said, I have no issue with the big church. I have no issue with people sitting in rows listening to a guy preach. But the Bible calls preaching foolishness, right?
And it's for a purpose. And what's that purpose in that verse?
The road should
so that people will get saved.
Yeah.
God has chose through the foolishness of preaching that people would get saved, not the foolishness of preaching that people would become disciples.
Yeah. And so my issue is not the rows or the preacher or the excellent church. My issue is that the road can't be the end.
Right.
Got to be the on-ramp.
Yep. Good.
Fulfilling the mission of Jesus, of gathering together and incarnating or bringing the gospel or fleshing out the gospel in our communities.
Yeah.
If that's the end game, then church can be 1 million people. I don't care.
Yeah. So what's a person, if they're going to do something practically, I would say one of the things they should do is they should ask, look, if you want to get somewhere, you got to first find out where you're at, and then you got to decide where you want to go. So if the goal is to be Christ-like, and we know that process is discipleship, you need to ask yourself, does my church have discipleship? Mm-hmm. Does it have a smaller group where people are being formed? And can I be a part of that group? If it doesn't have that, you need to ask why, or can somebody start it, or can you start it, or can you get involved? And you need to be involved in discipleship. You need to be involved in a small group of people because nobody knows you in the big group. That's why everybody's going to that church, Shannon, because they walk in there after worship starts. They leave at the end before they don't have to talk to anybody. And they even say things like, I don't want to talk to anybody. It's just me and God, which is the opposite of why we're at church.
And people outside the church get this. My barber, who I've been going to for a year, I was having a beer with him the other day. He's not a Jesus guy. And he says to me, hey, could you help me? So what do you mean help you? Yeah, with my marriage and my family, like I just need some help. He's essentially asking for discipleship is what he's asking for, right? Like, he's not a Jesus guy. That's not like a church strategy. That's in the heart of every
That's human. The Bible. That's Bible right there. That's the deal. But see, that's what we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah. So if you're not a Jesus person, if you're not a church person, but you've been considering moving that direction, the real simple thing is get online. You'll find out real quick if they believe in people meeting in other spaces, or if they have elements and other tools to help people move forward, other than just sitting in a row listening to the band and the music and the talk.
That's right. Making some things happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool, man. Well, thanks for coming on Warriors and Wildmen. I wish Doug was here throwing out his witty jokes and smoking a cigar and making me jealous. And I hope he enjoys jury duty as much as I enjoy doing the podcast. But we'll have you back on. We'll have you back on when Doug's here too. It'll be great.
All right, man.
Warriors and Wildmen. Go to warriorsandwildmen.com. Sign up for the podcast. Rate us, review us. If you're still on Facebook, I'm sorry. We're still there too, kind of like a little remnant hanging out, so you can find us in other places. Write us a comment, ideas on episodes, what you want us to talk about. Prayer requests, we're doing that on the Warriors and Wildmen tribe. And get a Warriors and Wildmen man card. We're getting ready to have a special deal on these for Christmas. They're steel. They are steel. You hear that? It's a steal. Do you have the metal to carry the Warriors and Wildmen man card? Do epic stuff, or we have other models available. Warriors and Wildmen out.